Donald Trump veering into another aspect, financial regulations. He had been speaking earlier about, of course, what's going on in North Korea. He has pulled out some hours earlier of a summit on June the 12th with North Korea. He said there a few moments ago that the most stringent sanctions will be put on North Korea because of their nuclear program. Of course, hours ago, they wrapped up their nuclear program. They say their sole one in the country. Let's now cross to Samira Khan, our Washington correspondent, who can maybe bring us right up to date about why this is important, why he was saying those things. What's the updates on this, Samira? What's happened today?
Well, the timing of this is certainly significant. It comes just hours after North Korea destroyed its only nuclear testing site, fulfilling just yet another condition North Korea agreed to make sure the meeting happens. Now, our correspondent was at the site, and he was among a few journalists who are allowed to witness it firsthand.
We've just visited the Punggye-ri nuclear test site, which is, frankly, no more. We saw 3 out of 4 tunnels there used for nuclear testing. One of them, the North Tunnel, actually was used for the latest 5 nuclear tests. The other 2 were new, and North Koreans told us that they had been ready to conduct nuclear tests there at any moment. So for them, blowing up the explosives inside was the real way of showing how they are ready to make real concessions. Now, the spectacle itself was quite impressive. The explosions looked like small eruptions of earth and rock from under the ground. Of course, we journalists couldn't really estimate as to how much damage what we witnessed today dealt to Pyongyang's nuclear program as a whole. But North Korea insists that they've made the first step. And now they will expect something in return. Now, we're on our way back to Wonsan, and so as soon as possible, we will be filing more reports.
So North Korea is keeping its end of the bargain for the sake of the meeting. But even though the decision to cancel the meeting came from the U.S. side, the White House seemed excited about it. And they released a commemorative coin depicting the 2 leaders all smiles and meeting just ahead of the summit. But the talks were seen world over as a positive development in bilateral relations. And Trump didn't shy away from taking credit. He even said that everyone said that he deserved a Nobel Peace Prize for it. But towards the end of today's letter, Trump signed off saying that he's looking forward to meeting with Kim in the future. But it seems that North Korea should be a little bit more cautious dealing with Trump in the future.
RT Washington correspondent Samira Khan with the update. Thanks, Samira. Yeah, lots of different aspects to this, lots of reaction. One of them was picked up by RT's Donald Quarter. He is more now who may be interested in jeopardizing any diplomatic breakthroughs.
This is a good deal for the United States. North Korea will freeze and then dismantle its nuclear program. South Korea and our other allies will be better protected. The entire world will be safer as we slow the spread of nuclear weapons.
The deal did sound good, but it collapsed a few years later. The U.S. promised North Korea 2 nuclear reactors, 500,000 tons of fuel a year, and a lifting of sanctions. But it didn't deliver. Fast forward to 2018, and yet another U.S. administration is promising to strike a deal with Pyongyang. Or is it?
You know, there's a chance that it'll work out. There's a very substantial chance that it won't work out. I think it'll be very successful, but as I always say, who knows? You know, I often say, who knows? Who knows? We'll see how it all works out. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
So are we going to be tantalized with another good deal with North Korea that's ready to go, only to see it fail again? Perhaps the U.S. sees the status quo of seeing North Korea as the ultimate threat as being something beneficial.
South Korea is spending billions of dollars making bases and paying U.S. troops, essentially, to be there to ostensibly protect against a threat up in the north. Now, that being the case, if there were to be peace in Korea, there's going to be questionings, well, do we need our troops there? And so I think in that sense, there are forces that don't want a resolution, that benefit off the instability and allow us to maintain these troops and dozens of bases and posts in this small country in a region that we think strategically is important.
Enemies of a government are friends of its military-industrial complex, and having a nemesis like North Korea is a great excuse to pump up that military budget.
The request includes an additional $4 billion to support urgent missile defeat and defense enhancements to counter the threat from North Korea, $0.7 billion to repair damage to US Navy ships, and $1.2 billion in support of my administration's South Asia strategy.
Japan is one ally that stands to benefit from U.S. military expansion, especially after the recent re-election of its prime minister, who vowed to defend Japan from North Korean aggression weeks after Pyongyang's missile launches.
This election is about whether we can defend Japan from North Korea and ensure we live happily.
And the unpredictability on the Korean peninsula has fringe benefits for some American rivals. The South China Sea has been a serious bone of contention as of late, with the U.S. attempting to assert its naval presence there, much to Beijing's annoyance. So, the larger threat of North Korea's nuclear program has shifted U.S. military attention that would otherwise be focused towards China. And although Russia doesn't directly benefit from its unpredictable neighbor, it certainly doesn't mind a challenge to U.S. dominance in the region.
What these countries are just beginning to recognize is that getting into an arms race, as it's increasing in Japan, as China is expanding its military operations, it takes money out of the economic sector, damages an economy, which weakens their economy, is a very complicated issue, except for the South Koreans, who are essentially getting the short end of the stick. This is something that must change. That countries, as they begin to take the spreadsheet and figure it out, they will begin to benefit the countries in the region from peace in Northeast Asia.
Well, let's go live now to Mark Alman, Director of the Crisis Research Institute in the UK, for more on our top story, that of Donald Trump cancelling the North Korean nuclear summit. You're very welcome to the programme. We just heard, in fact, from the US President, I'm not sure if you picked it up live a few minutes earlier, he warned that US weapons are again locked and loaded. How much of a threat is that in reality, do you think?
Well, in a sense, Donald Trump is speaking from both sides of his mouth, because his letter to Kim calling off the summit was remarkably emollient, suggesting that he hoped that they could at some point meet in the future and that the North Koreans really needed to tone down their rhetoric. But as you say, his remarks a few minutes ago sounded much more belligerent. And in a sense, that reflects the important lobby inside the White House and inside the Washington establishment that, in fact, waving a big stick, imposing very strict sanctions and implicit military threats, has brought the North Korean regime to the table. And I think you could say the Vice President Pence, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor's school of thought seems to be winning. The question is, will this actually have the effect they want? It could well be that the North Koreans, who had also been, of course, very belligerent in their statements only a few hours ago, may have been wanting to test how far Trump was desperate for a summit in order to burnish his credentials, because, if you like, in international terms, Donald Trump has suffered several blows, somewhat self-inflicted. Pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal has caused many of his allies in Europe, as well as Russia and China and so on, to be publicly expressing dissatisfaction. His support for Israel, his sending the embassy of the United States to Jerusalem, has also broken ranks with many of his allies. So the North Koreans may have thought that Trump was under pressure to have at least one universally recognised foreign policy success. And Trump may not have wanted to be seen to be the weaker person desperate for the summit, but he has still left the door ajar.
Many are pointing out that the timing of this is extraordinary, cancelling the summit within hours of Pyongyang destroying what it says it's his Seoul nuclear facility, which our correspondent was there to witness. Your take?
Well, I mean, certainly that would seem to be a highly public demonstration that the North Koreans were willing to stop nuclear tests, and that at least was a step towards denuclearization. Of course, there must be people in Pyongyang who say, do we really want to give up our actual nuclear weapons, a small number of warheads that we have, until we're confident that the United States and its allies won't attack us? Equally, the United States, Japan, to some extent less so South Korea, say we don't want to make any deal until North Korea is completely disarmed. And so there is this great problem of trust. And it may have been that the South Korean president and the North Korean leader established a personal relationship when they met, but we've yet to see that established between the Americans and the Japanese, for instance, as the other major US ally in the region. So it's a terribly difficult situation, and it could be that each side is trying still to lead towards a summit meeting, but wants the other one to come begging for it, or to be seen to be the one who's demanding, requesting.
But you'd become dizzy, wouldn't you, trying to follow Donald Trump's statements on North Korea alone, going back and forth. What's he trying to gain, do you think, by veering simultaneously between the doors open, we look forward to making progress, and then we've got bombs on standby?
Well, I think partly his personality tends to be erratic and belligerent, but also partly I think his understanding of the North Koreans is that they are very bellicose in their statements, so therefore I have to really up the volume in order to get through. It's also that he's torn in Washington between, in a sense, the campaign he ran on, which was that he wanted to disengage America from many problems, leave defence to countries like South Korea to defend itself and Japan and so on, and the fact that he, of necessity, is surrounded by professionals of the national security establishment in the United States who regard that as an anathema, as a break with what they see as a successful 60 or 70 years of policy making. And so Trump, in some ways, is the dissident inside the White House. And at the same time, because he is perhaps inexperienced, because he's also a mercurial personality, he is very difficult to predict. Now, he would say, look at Richard Nixon. He was very difficult to predict, yet he made a great dramatic opening to China when people thought of China as the red ogre. And he may be thinking that he can, on a smaller scale with North Korea, achieve a similar dramatic breakthrough.